We'd now like to take this afternoon and shift it from inside the Community Foundation out, which was the first part, to looking at some of those wonderful organizations that Brock has talked about making a difference in our community. Over the past 12 months, we've learned a lot about how some local organizations, they haven't started to use belonging. They've been using belonging for a very long time as the lens through which they do their work. They understand asset-based inclusion. They understand breaking down barriers. And today we're really lucky to have two of those organizations share their stories so that you can hear about the kind of work that they're doing. First up is a man who really needs very little introduction. He is a gentleman, John Neufeld. Since September of 2009, John has had not only the responsibility, but I think he would call it the great privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the HoF Friendship, a multi-service organization focused on housing, addiction treatment, food security, and community development. The HoF Friendship envisions a healthy community where all can belong and thrive. To fulfill this vision, they strengthen people and communities by being there when needed most, by speaking up, and by working together. Please join me in welcoming John to the stage. John?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I want to commend the Kitchener Waterloo Community Foundation donors, board, and staff for focusing on belonging. Belonging is foundational, transformational, and relational. Belonging is foundational, transformational, and relational. Is that less than 140 characters? Did we get it in there? I want to begin and end today with the following quote from Desmond Tutu. "My humanity is caught up and is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. We say a person is a person through other persons." By the end of today, from the different presentations, from the interactions you've had with each other, may this quote, by the time you walk out these doors, mean even more to you than it does maybe at first glance. Belonging is foundational. 5 years ago, Dr. George Berrigan retired from his medical family practice. He could have gone in to have a very comfortable and laid-back retirement. Instead, he made that fatal mistake of getting intertwined with the Mancinis, and he joined the Psychiatric Outreach Project at St. John's Kitchen. And through that, Dr. Berrigan got to serve the individuals at St. John's, at our men's hostel. He had a makeshift medical clinic in a Waterloo church in the basement, and he got to work with the individuals we serve. And a few years ago, I went to Dr. Berrigan and I said, "So you've been doing this for a few years. What have you learned? What surprised you the most? What was your aha?" And Dr. Berrigan said, "I am stunned and appalled. I can't get over that all the individuals we serve did not get their ABCs growing up. Acceptance, belonging, care." It is for that reason the board at HoF Friendship has also charged us with an incredibly audacious and bold vision statement a few years ago, a healthy community where all, not some, not 80%, not 50%, all can belong and thrive. Not survive, not get by, not be happy with what they're given, but thrive. You see, over 76 years, we've learned that without the foundation of belonging, all of the work we do in the community can be useless. We can provide housing, we can provide food, we can provide treatment, but if we don't help the individuals we serve get a sense of belonging, we will not succeed. Today, in your annual report, there's a great story in here, and it's got a picture of Clarence and Gary who have joined us here today. And by the way, I don't know, I think they've brought their Sharpies with them. They're more than happy to autograph these for you. These annual reports will be worth far more in a couple years with those autographs in them. I'm incredibly proud to serve with Clarence. And I asked Clarence a while ago, I said, Clarence, how is it that today you're walking with individuals struggling with all sorts of challenges, and you're walking with them and you're giving them a sense of belonging, and yet only a number of years ago you were in their shoes? How did you get to where you are today? And Clarence said, because this community always made me feel like I belonged. And they never gave up on me, even when they probably should have. But I always felt a sense of belonging. And so today, Clarence helps and walks with others to provide that sense of belonging. Belonging is foundational. Belonging is also transformational. Belonging is not some theoretical concept that's hard to understand or get one's hands around. It's quite simple. You just have to look at it from a different angle and ask some different questions. I love the little cards you all had as you walked in and asked some different questions. And that's essentially what helped us change things a little bit too. One of our colleagues, Brandon, who also walks with a number of individuals, multiple challenges from housing to addictions to mental health, asked a very profound question of all of us a few years ago, and it helped us change the way we looked at things. Brandon does the basic foundational that all of us at House of Friendship are called to do, and that is you engage with individuals at a human level. Everyone's got a name and a story. There's no addicts, there's no poor people, there's no homeless people. Everyone's got a name and a story. That's the basic foundation. But from there, Brandon goes the next step and he says, and here's the most profound question, what makes you come alive? And he asked that question of both the people he served and his friends, family, people in the community. And he was struck by the answers he was getting. And this is where belonging is transformational. You see, all of us are taught that we're different. That, you know, I've got a yellow ball, you've got a blue ball, you've got a red ball, so we shouldn't talk to each other. We have different cultures, we have different faiths, we have different neighborhoods, we have different socioeconomic status. But all of a sudden, when you ask the question, what makes you come alive? And it may be a professor who teaches Greek mythology and somebody who's experiencing homelessness, who has a passion for that and reads all about it, are connected. Does it all of a sudden matter that they're two different people from two different backgrounds? No. Belonging is transformational. At House of Friendship, we talk about, charity is giving food from the table. Justice is providing a seat at the table. See, belonging is an issue of justice. Charity makes us feel good. It feels really good to give something. But there's a discrepancy in the relationship. I have, somebody needs, so I give and I feel good, but there's not this. Belonging, what makes you come alive, you start getting on the same platform. Brandon shares this great story of, he was working with Abraham from Eritrea, and Abraham worked as a tailor for his father in both Eritrea and then in Kenya. And Brandon started, and then came to Canada and had a number of struggles, and then Brandon came in contact with him after he'd been at the hostel and through some addiction programs. And he couldn't help but notice every time Abraham talked about the clothes that he made back home for people, or when he fixed a problem with someone's clothing that no one else could fix, Abraham just came alive. And so Brandon said, what if we got a used sewing machine? Would you like that? And before he knew it, that's what happened. And several days later, Abraham comes through and he shows him this beautiful pillowcase he had sewn because he couldn't afford to buy his own. And Brandon got thinking, and he said, Abraham, I have a gentleman that I'm working with that's in the hospital and he's in there for a long time. Would you be willing to sew him a pillowcase as well? And he said, absolutely, and I'm going to make it with lots of colors because those hospital rooms are so boring. And so Abraham sews this beautiful pillow, and Brandon takes Abraham to the hospital and Abraham shares this gift with this gentleman. And Brandon writes, I watched as two strangers talked for nearly half an hour about their experiences in life. I'll throw out a challenge to you. Brock said about dinner parties and what can happen at those. At your next dinner party, at the next time you are out in the community, you meet somebody new, don't ask that old boring question, what do you do? Ask, what makes you come alive? Ask, what breaks your heart? Ask people what their Popeye moment is. Some of you are old enough. What happened to Popeye? He took it, and then what was his famous line? I can't stand it no more. What's your Popeye moment? What is it that you can't stand no more? Ask that question and see the dynamic change. I also want to send out kudos to the City of Kitchener, and I know Michael's going to be speaking about their focus on neighborhoods and communities. And I want to back them up on that fully because we have learned over the last 30 years of being involved in community centers the power of changing when you build a sense of belonging in neighborhoods. It is incredibly powerful. I can't think of a better example than in Sunnydale Community Center, where we have Annie there from Syria, who, here we have a small little neighborhood, dense housing, people living on low income, and we've got all walks of life and cultures. We have red, yellow, green, purple, all these balls, to a point where we have individuals living in the same community that back home in their country of origin, they would not be talking to each other. And now here in Canada, we've got them living side by side, unit by unit. And Annie struggles with that, and that's hard for her. She's worried about her family in Syria and for their safety. And now there's all these strangers around. So what does Annie do? Annie sets up a little table right in front of her small lawn and serves Arabic tea or coffee a couple of times a week and invites whoever to come by. And they do. Angela and Jane here often visit Sunnydale, so you know what I'm talking about. And it's all face cultures sitting around this little table, creating a sense of belonging in this neighborhood. So kudos to City of Kitchener for doing that. Lastly, belonging is relational. This one's the tough one. Belonging is relational. doesn't just change the people we serve. Belonging changes us as well. That is a hard one to take and to learn. This work has taught me that we are all broken. I am broken. It's just that some of us have the luxury to hide behind nice clothes, car, house, education, job title. But we are all broken. The only difference between me and the people we serve at House of Friendship is they have nothing to hide behind. Their brokenness is so open and wide to see. Belonging changes us, changes the kind of life we have. And we could live a very clean, clear life, or you could live a little bit messier and a much richer and deeper life. 10 years ago, Steve moved to our community at the age of 45. Why did he move here? At the age of 16, his father sent him out, and so he was not to return, and so he entered the life of homelessness at a young age. But Steve had an incredible talent. Steve was incredibly hardworking, and he had very gifted hands, and he was an incredible carpenter. So he would move around Canada, work incredibly hard, and build up. He would supervise a number of crews. The problem is, though, Steve never experienced a day of sobriety from the age of 13. Why? Because both the alcohol and the addiction to work allowed him to bury some very painful memories of how he was mistreated at a young age. And so Steve goes along in one community, and basically he works really hard, burns his bridges, and has to leave. And he goes to the next community, works really hard, makes a go of it, but due to his addiction, again, alienates himself, upsets a lot of people, and he's got to leave. At 45, he could no longer go anywhere. He's in Ottawa. He knew he had to have change, and someone put a few pamphlets in front of him and said, "You need help." Randomly, or I don't know how this stuff all works, but one of those brochures happened to be for a program here in Kitchener Waterloo. It was our addiction program, and so 10 years ago he came. And I'll never forget when last year he came into my office and he said, "The first time in my life that I received a hug was at the age of 45 when I walked through the doors of that addiction program." The first time I received a hug in my life, I was 45 years old. And that's when the sense of belonging started to be built within him. And he struggled along, and what was interesting is Steve learned the important lesson that belonging is relational. That once you're given the gift of belonging, you need to share that with others. And so 5 years ago, Steve started volunteering at the Out of the Cold program. And it was there that he met his beautiful future wife, Mel. And last September, I had the deep privilege of being invited to that wedding. And I have to tell you, I've been to a lot of weddings and a lot of fancy ones, but I've never been to a more authentic and nicer wedding. It was a small wedding in a neighborhood, Kingsdale neighborhood, in a backyard. We had about 30 folding chairs set up, lots of decorations. It was just beautiful. And as I'm sitting there and through the ceremony, I have never heard more authentic vows And as I'm sitting through the ceremony, what kept going through my head was, but whose house is this? Why is this wedding here? This isn't their house. This isn't a family member's house. Whose house is this? As the ceremony ends, an elderly lady stands up and says, "Welcome to my home." 4 years ago, Steve walked into my life because I needed that addition built. But the minute he walked into my home and I saw his smile in those eyes, he immediately reminded me of my 19-year-old son that I tragically lost years ago when he went to university. Belonging is relational. And so I go back to where we started at the beginning with our quote. My humanity is caught up and is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. We say a person is a person through other persons. Thank you.